Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for November 7th, 2023. Well, yesterday I spoke about the end of the empire, the ongoing collapse of credibility of this so-called unipolar order, and the implications for the United States and Europe. Today I want to look at an element of that, which is the fact that President Joe Biden is in big trouble. But so are almost all of the governments in the Western world. We see governments that are acting on behalf of a blueprint which has no national interest to it. It tries to define the national interest from the standpoint of protecting the corporate cartels, protecting the City of London, protecting Wall Street, protecting the debt bubble that's been accumulated by the major banks and supported and defended by the Federal Reserve and other central banks. The result of this is that we are in a permanent state of war and economic instability. And this has profound implications for the lives of every one of us, including the puppet president, Joe Biden. The people who are pulling the strings on Biden's presidency cannot help but be aware of the trouble that he's in right now with the cascade of bad news that's been hitting him. And the presidential election is now 1 year away. And in fact, the first caucuses start in Iowa in just a little bit more than 2 months. And with the president being besieged on many fronts, there's no alternative from either party that's emerging to bail out this collapsing order. Let's just look at some of the predicates of this. Gaza. The president has committed himself to a defense of the policies of Israeli thug Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu has committed Israel to a course which will never provide peace, especially when you think about what is the long-term effect of killing civilians, including, as of now, more than 4,000 children, not leaving them a place to escape, and in fact, carrying out a policy which Netanyahu has admitted at times is the equivalent of ethnic cleansing, driving the Palestinians out of Israel to eliminate the possibility of a two-state solution. And so there's no let-up in Netanyahu's bombing campaign. The calls for ceasefire from many of America's allies in the region have not moved Biden. Biden is still saying no ceasefire, but quote, humanitarian pauses, unquote. Makes no sense. No way to do that. And so this is one area where Biden is going to suffer because of the suffering that his policies are inflicting on innocent civilians in Gaza. You saw the effects of this with the large majority of nations voting in the UN General Assembly a little more than a week ago for a ceasefire. 120 votes for a ceasefire in Gaza and only 14 against it, one of those being the United States. And now China is the president of the UN Security Council, and the Chinese are calling for a peace conference and will probably move for that in the next couple of days. Politico reported on a dissent memo that's circulating in the State Department that shows that not all is well in Tony Blinken's house. The Blinken, of course, is the one who was given a very rude reception when he traveled to visit U.S. allies in the region this week and was told that his idea of no ceasefire is unacceptable. Well, now we see that, according to Politico, there's a memo drafted by mid-level officials of the State Department critical of the failure to comment on Netanyahu's tactics. And this includes people saying the failure to criticize the attacks on civilians and non-military targets harms U.S. interests worldwide. And it even states that it feeds doubts about the U.S. commitment to the so-called rules-based order, which Blinken talks about so often. So this is something which is another aspect of the loss of credibility of the United States. Then you have the Ukraine situation. I'll just repeat what I said yesterday. Time magazine has an article saying that Zelensky is alone. The former man of the year is now besieged by doubts within his own cabinet and his own military. The article quotes some of them saying that Zelensky is delusional, and you can't even talk to him about the failure of the policy, the failure of the counteroffensive, and what that means. Then NBC News reports that the U.S. is speaking to some in Ukraine about negotiations. Of course, these are negotiations that should have been brought to fruition in March or April of 2022, but were undermined and sabotaged by the U.S. and NATO. Now, Zelensky denied that there are talks going on, but maybe they're going on behind his back. Who knows? Then you have the opposition of the Congress to the budget-busting outlays to fund 2 wars and more to come. The population is turning against these wars. The Congress is a little slow in picking up on that because the Congress is still supporting the $15 billion special fund to Israel. But more importantly, if the population is turning against it, what's going to happen with the Congress? Are they going to really go to the districts in the upcoming election and say, well, we stood firm with Ukraine when Ukraine has been destroyed because of the arrogance of the attempt by the unipolar order to defeat Russia? And of course, Biden has the Hunter Biden inquiry. The only thing I'll say on that is there are a lot of interesting questions that should be put to him, and I'm not sure he knows how to answer them. Finally, polls are showing that Biden would lose to Trump in 5 key battleground states if the election were held today. Now, it's still early, but as David Axelrod, the architect of Obama's victories, pointed out, the problem with Biden in these polls is causing tremors within the party. And the question is, what can he do to reverse the collapse, especially among some of the traditional demographics for the Democrats, namely African Americans and Hispanics? So there's a big problem for the Democrats and Biden. No alternative leadership is available. Harris is not credible. There's, as you would say in sports, the Democrats have a very thin bench. More importantly, there's no alternative policy, no thinking outside the box. The unipolar order is all they'll talk about, and neoliberal economics is what they're committed to. So you have the other aspect of this, which is that the world is moving away from the unipolar order and the so-called rules-based order. There's no answer to this from the establishment, except you can't trust China, Russia is authoritarian, and on and on and on with the narratives. And in the meantime, they're using wars and other kinds of operations to disrupt the emergence of a new system outside of the post-1971 petrodollar system controlled by the United States and central banks. They're not even allowing discussion of this alternative to participate in to be engaged in the West. So perhaps Biden's controllers should remember the case of the former East German leader Erich Honecker. In 1989, Honecker was insisting to all of his party members that all is well, that the East German government would continue for many, many years into the future. And he said this at a very important party congress 1 week before the wall fell and brought down his government. Reality broke through the narratives. People who had previously been fearful of the Stasi, who were afraid to be overheard speaking out against the government, suddenly were pouring into the streets, and this outburst of freedom toppled a dictatorial regime overnight. Now, when you have these reports that aides are telling Zelensky they can't talk to him, that he's delusional, well, the same thing could be said for those insisting that Biden deserves a second term. This is not the thinking of the majority of the American people. The same thing could be said in Germany for the Schultz traffic light coalition, which is collapsing. Who knows what's going on in France? Obviously, Macron is not very strong. As for Sunak, the Tories may cease to exist in the next round of elections. So the question then is, who will put forward the alternative policies to bring us out of this civilizational crisis? That's what the Schiller Institute is doing. That's what we've been doing for years, going back to the important work that Lyndon LaRouche did from the 1970s forward. There are solutions, and you can check out the links that I'm going to post at the bottom of the description page to familiarize yourself with some of the things that we're doing. Now, I have a very important announcement to make, but a short one. The Schiller Institute has been included in a conference taking place in Afghanistan about how to upgrade the Afghan economy from one which is basically a graveyard for people because of the results of the nearly 30 years of warfare there, which goes back to Brzezinski's initiative in the end of the 70s. There's an attempt to put together a development picture under the banner of the Ibn Sina approach. This was an approach initiated by Helga Zepp-LaRouche. The Schiller Institute is there at the conference, and I hope I'll have somewhat of a report for you either tomorrow or the next day. So thanks for joining me. Don't give up hope. Become part of a solution. That's the only way that you can hold your head up high and affect the people you know who otherwise are probably more demoralized than you.